Class. Today is day 159. It is Thursday, and we are on day 2 of Wonder. We are going to be reading chapters 5 through 8 today. Again, I know that these chapters, it sounds like we're reading a lot of chapters. However, I just want to show you that a lot of the chapters are, one page. So this is one chapter is done by the next page. So even though it says we're reading 4 chapters, it's about the same as reading one chapter in any of the other books that we've been reading. It might even be a little bit less. So today, that's what we're going to be doing. Before we get started, I want to go over a few notes with you today. So if you look over here, you can see, again, the purpose of reading this text is to understand what it's like to be different and to learn how to be kind to others no matter their differences. So yesterday, we already started to learn how August is a little bit different from some of the students that he's going to school with, and I want you to be thinking about that while you're reading, thinking about what that would feel like, and then thinking about how to be kind to people. So when given the choice of being right or kind, we choose kind. Today, these are the vocabulary that I want to go over. So an elective, you'll learn more about this as you get older, definitely in high school. An elective is a class that can be chosen by the student. So it's not a mandatory class. Mandatory classes are classes like math, ELA, literacy, science. Those are mandatory classes. Sometimes electives might have to do with something a little bit different. It could be like in high school, there are like cooking classes, or there might be like a special gym class or a special kind of science class. That's an elective. But it wouldn't be like your normal classes that you have to take. It's a not required class that you choose to take, okay? A Rubik's Cube is this little thing right here. You try to move all the sides so that it's all correct, like all one color on each side. And then percussion instruments. Those are drums, piano, keyboard, triangle, tambourine. So you can kind of see on here all the different kinds of drums. You see the piano, you see the keyboard, you see cymbals, triangle. Those are percussion instruments. So you'll learn a little bit about that later too. All right. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm just going to, right here, type my name in, again, Mrs. Falby, and then I'm going to open the chapter. You can follow along with the chapter on this video, or you can open it like this one. And then I'm going to press next. So our objective today is we're going to be identifying character feelings. Like I said, August, or like we talked about yesterday, August is our narrator. So we're going to be hearing a lot about August's feelings through his thoughts, words, and actions. So I want you to be paying close attention to character feelings in this part of the story. So what are character feelings? They describe how a character is feeling at a certain time. They're also called emotions, and they can change often. And you'll notice that throughout the story, that from one chapter to the next, August's feelings might change. So we look at characters' thoughts, what they're thinking, their words, what they say, and their actions, what they do. And those things tell us about how they're feeling. And we can also think about how those things would make us feel. So here are our steps. Pay attention to the character's thoughts, words, and actions, and what happened to the character in that text. And that shows you what the character might be feeling. Ask yourself, how would this make me feel? Make an inference about how the character is feeling, and then always find your evidence to support your answer. So we will practice this together today. So we're going to start reading where it says driving. If you remember, yesterday we left off where they were at his friend's house, and his parents were talking to his friend's mom about how they want to send August to school next year, about how the mom would like to send August to school next year. And August is just hearing about that. So we're going to start with that part of the story. They're in the car, they're driving back. It was a long drive home. I fell asleep in the back seat like I always do. My head on Via's lap like she was my pillow, a towel wrapped around the seatbelt so I wouldn't drool all over her. Via fell asleep too, and Mom and Dad talked quietly about grown-up things I didn't care about. I don't know how long I was sleeping, but when I woke up, there was a full moon outside the car window. It was purple night, and we were driving on a highway full of cars. And then I heard Mom and Dad talking about me. We can't keep protecting him, Mom whispered to Dad, who was driving. We can't just pretend he's going to wake up tomorrow and this isn't going to be his reality, because it is, Nate, and we have to help him learn to deal with it. We can't just keep avoiding situations that... So sending him off to middle school like a lamb to slaughter? Dad answered angrily. But he didn't even finish his sentence because he saw me in the mirror looking up. What's a lamb to slaughter? I asked sleepily. Go back to sleep, Augie, Dad said softly. Everyone will stare at me at school, I said, suddenly crying. Honey, Mom said. She turned around in the front seat and put her hand on my hand. You know if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But we spoke to the principal there, and he told him about you, and he really wants to meet you. What did you tell him about me? How funny you are and how kind and smart. When I told him you read Dragon Rider when you were 6, he was like, wow, I have to meet this kid. Did you tell him anything else? I said. Mom smiled. Her smile kind of hugged me. I told him about all your surgeries and how brave you are, she said. So he knows what I look like, I asked. Well, we brought pictures from last summer in Montauk, Dad said. We showed him pictures of the whole family. And that great shot of you holding the flounder on the boat? You were there too? I have to admit, I felt a little disappointed that he was a part of this. We both talked to him, yes, Dad said. He's a really nice man. You would like him, Mom added. Suddenly, it felt like they were on the same side. Wait, so when did you meet him? I said. He took us on a tour of the school last year, said Mom. Last year? I said. So you've been thinking about this for a whole year and you didn't tell me? We didn't know if you'd get in, Augie, answered Mom. It's a very hard school to get into. There's a whole admissions process. I didn't see the point in telling you and having you get all worked up about it unnecessarily. But you're right, Augie. We should have told you when we found out last month that you got in, said Dad. In hindsight, sighed Mom. Yes, I guess. Did that lady who came to the house that time you have something to do with this? I said, the one that gave me the test? Yes, actually, said Mom, looking guilty. Yes. You told me it was an IQ test, I said. I know. Well, that was a white lie, she answered. It was a test you need to take to get into the school. You did very well on it, by the way. So you lied. A white lie, but yes, sorry, she said, trying to smile. But when I didn't smile back, she turned around in her seat and faced forward. What's a lamb to slaughter? I said. Mom sighed and gave Daddy a look. I shouldn't have said that, Dad said, looking at me in the rearview mirror. It's not true. Here's the thing. Mommy and I love you so much, we want to protect you any way we can. It's just sometimes we want to do it in different ways. I don't want to go to school, I answered, folding my arms. It will be good for you, Augie, said Mom. Maybe I'll go next year, I answered, looking out the window. This year would be better, Augie, said Mom. You know why? Because you'll be going into 5th grade, and that's the first year of middle school, for everyone. You won't be the only new kid. I'll be the only kid who looks like me, I said. I'm not going to say it won't be a big challenge for you, because you know better than that, she answered. But it'll be good for you, Augie. You'll make lots of friends, and you'll learn things you'd never learn with me. She turned in her seat and looked at me. When we took the tour, you know what they had in their science lab? A little baby chick that was just hatching out of its egg. It was so cute, Augie. It actually kind of reminded me of you when you were a little baby, with those big brown eyes of yours. I usually love when they talk about when I was a baby. Sometimes I want to curl up into a tiny ball and let them hug me and kiss me all over. I miss being a baby, not knowing stuff. But I wasn't in the mood for that now. I don't want to go, I said. Pause there. So, we just learned a lot about Augie's feelings in that section of the story. So we're going to go back to our question. So this is the one I'm going to do for you out loud. So it says, reread this section. Now this is important because if I'm giving you text here, this is the area I want you to look at. So I want you to reread that as you're answering these questions. So first one says, how did August feel? So we're looking for August. That's important. How does he feel when he finds out that his parents visited Beecher Prep last year? So once he finds out that he did that. So we're going to go back in the text and find that area. So right here. So he knows what I looked like, I asked. Well, we brought a picture of you last year in Montauk. We showed him all the pictures of the whole family and that great shot of you holding the flounder on the boat. You were there too? I have to admit, I felt kind of disappointed that he was part of this. So we know he's disappointed that his dad did this. We both talked to him, yes. He's a really nice man. You would like him, Mom added. Suddenly, I felt like they were on the same side, so he kind of feels like they're teaming up on him. He took us on a tour of the school last year. Last year? So you've been thinking about this for a whole year and you didn't tell me? So that's another thing. He's saying, like, how would you, you've known this for a whole year and you didn't tell me? He does not seem like he's happy. And then the last thing he says right here about the IQ test, again, he finds out that they lied. And he says he doesn't want to go to school. So is he excited because he always wanted to go to school? No, because he says he doesn't want to go to school right here. I don't want to go to school. So that's definitely not the answer. Is he upset because they lied to him for an entire year? That could definitely be it. You lied, I said. And then he says, I don't want to go to school. And he's just seeming really upset about them lying to him for that whole year. So that could definitely be our answer. He's scared because he never wants to leave his house and go outside. So right now, they're driving back from a friend's house. So it's not that he doesn't want to leave his house. That's not it. So that can't be our answer. Is he relieved because he didn't know how to tell his parents that he wanted to go to school? So he's saying he doesn't want to go to school, so that can't be our answer. So I know that he's upset because they lied to him. So now I need to find evidence that he's upset that they lied to him. So these are all pieces of evidence. So I want to see what one proves that he's upset because they lied to him. But you're right, Augie. We should have told you when we found out last month that you got in, said Dad. So that's Dad talking. That's not August, so that can't be our answer. Last year, I said. So you've been thinking about this for a whole year and you didn't tell me? So that's Augie talking, and that's talking about how they waited a whole year to tell him, so that could definitely be our answer. What's a lamb to slaughter? I said. So that is Augie talking, but that's not telling us anything about how he's feeling. That's him asking a question. Mom smiled at me. Her smile kind of hugged me. So that's kind of saying that he's feeling good because his mom smiled at him, but we're trying to find evidence that he's feeling upset. So definitely B would be our answer. So these would be our two answers because this evidence proves that he's upset they lied to him. Okay, next. So now you're going to be able to do some on your own right here once we're done reading. So we're going to keep reading where we left off. So we stopped here. I don't want to go. How about this? Can you at least meet Mr. Tushman before making up your mind? Mom asked. Mr. Tushman? I said. He's the principal, Mom answered Mom. Mr. Tushman, I repeated. I know, right? Dad answered, smiling and looking at me in the rearview mirror. Can you believe that name, Augie? I mean, who on earth would ever agree to have a name like Mr. Tushman? I smiled, even though I didn't want to let them see me smile. Dad was the one person in the world who could make me laugh no matter how much. I didn't want to laugh. Dad always made everyone laugh. Augie, you know you should go to that school just so you can hear his name over the loudspeaker, Dad said excitedly. Can you imagine how funny that would be? Hello, hello, paging Mr. Tushman. He was using a fake high old lady voice. Hi, Mr. Tushman. I see you're running a little behind today. Did your car get rear-ended again? What a bum rap. I started laughing, not because I thought he was being that funny, but because I wasn't in the mood to stay mad anymore. It could be worse, though, Dad continued in his normal voice. Mommy and I had a professor in college called Miss Butt. Mom was laughing now, too. Is that for real? I said. Roberta Butt, Mom answered, raising her hand as if to swear. Bobby Butt. She had huge cheeks, said Dad. Nate, said Mom. What? She had big cheeks, that's all I'm saying. Mom laughed and shook her head at the same time. Hey, I know, said Dad excitedly. Let's fix them up on a blind date. Can you imagine? Miss Butt meet Mr. Tushman. Mr. Tushman, here's Miss Butt. They could get married and have a bunch of little tushies. Poor Mr. Tushman, answered Mom, shaking her head. Augie hasn't even met the man yet, Nate. Who's Mr. Tushman? Via said groggily. She had just woken up. He's the principal of my new school, I answered. So, also, what do we think about Augie's dad? What word would we use to describe him? I think he's pretty funny. He's making lots of jokes, and he's definitely trying to make his son feel better. So now we're going to get to where they actually get to meet Mr. Tushman. All right, paging Mr. Tushman. I would have been more nervous about meeting Mr. Tushman if I'd known I was also going to be meeting some kids from the new school. But I didn't know, so if anything, I was kind of giggly. I couldn't stop thinking about all the jokes Daddy had made about Mr. Tushman's name. So when me and Mom arrived at Beecher Prep a few weeks before the start of school, and I saw Mr. Tushman standing there waiting for us at the entrance, I started giggling right away. He didn't look at all what I pictured, though. I guess I thought he would have a huge butt, but he didn't. In fact, he was a pretty normal guy. Tall and thin, old but not really old. He seemed nice. He shook my mom's hand first. Hi, Mr. Tushman. It's so nice to see you again, said Mom. This is my son, August. Mr. Tushman looked right at me and smiled and nodded. He put his hand out for me to shake. Hi, August, he said totally normally. It's a pleasure to meet you. Hi, I mumbled, dropping my hand into his hand while I looked down at his feet. He was wearing red Adidas. So, he said, kneeling down in front of me so I couldn't look at his sneakers but had to look at his face. Your mom and dad have told me a lot about you. Like, what have they told you? I asked. Sorry? Honey, you have to speak up, said Mom. Like what? I asked, trying not to mumble. I admit, I have a bad habit of mumbling. Well, that you like to read, said Mr. Tushman, and that you're a great artist. He had blue eyes and white eyelashes. And you're into science, right? Uh-huh, I said, nodding. We have a couple of great science electives at Beecher, he said. Maybe you'll take one of them. Uh-huh, I said, though I had no idea what an elective was. So are you ready to take the tour? You mean we're doing that now? I said. Did you think that we were going to the movies? He answered, smiling as he stood up. You didn't tell me we were taking the tour, I said to Mom in my accusing voice. Augie, she started to say. It'll be fine, August, said Mr. Tushman, holding his hand out to me. I promise. I think he wanted me to take his hand, but I looked at Mom's instead. He smiled and started walking toward the entrance. Mommy gave my hand a squeeze, though I don't know if it was an I love you squeeze or an I'm sorry squeeze. Probably a little of both. The only school I'd ever been inside before was Via's, when I went with Mom and Dad to watch Via sing in a spring concert and stuff like that. This school was very different. It was smaller. It smelled like a hospital. So pause there for a second. I want you to think about how is August feeling in this part of the story. So this is what you're going to be answering your question on next, and then you're going to have one more section to answer a question on. But I want you to be thinking about, based on his thoughts, words, and actions there, how was August feeling when he met Mr. Tushman? Okay? Now we're going to keep going, and then I'll talk to you about the next one. Nice, Mrs. Garcia. That's the title. We followed Mr. Tushman down the few hallways. There weren't a lot of people around, and the few people who were there didn't seem to notice me at all, though that may have been because they didn't see me. I sort of hid behind Mom as I walked. I know that sounds like kind of babyish of me, but I wasn't feeling very brave right then. We ended up in a small room with the words Office of Middle School Director on the door. Inside, there was a desk with a nice-seeming lady sitting behind it. This is Mrs. Garcia, said Mr. Tushman, and the lady smiled at Mom and took off her glasses and got up out of her chair. My mother shook her hand and said, Isabel Pullman, nice to meet you. And this is August, Mr. Tushman said. Mom kind of stepped to the side a bit so I would move forward. Then that thing happened that I've seen happen a million times before. When I looked up at her, Mrs. Garcia's eyes dropped for a second. It was so fast that no one else would have noticed, since the rest of her face stayed exactly the same. She was smiling a really shiny smile. "Such a pleasure to meet you, August," she said, holding out her hand for me to shake. "Hi," I said quietly, giving her my hand, but I didn't want to look at her face, so I kept staring at her glasses, which hung from a chain around her neck. "Wow, what a firm grip," said Mrs. Garcia. Her hand was really warm. "The kid's got a killer handshake," Mr. Tushman agreed, and everyone laughed above my head. "You can call me Mrs. G," Mrs. Garcia said. I think she was talking to me, but I was looking at all the stuff on her desk now. That's what everyone calls me, Mrs. G. "I forgot my combination, Mrs. G. I need a new late pass, Mrs. G. Mrs. G, I want to change my elective." "Mrs. G's actually the one who runs the place," said Mr. Tushman, which again made all the grown-ups laugh. "I'm here every morning by 7:30, Mrs. Garcia continued, still looking at me while I stared at her brown sandals and small purple flowers on the buckles. "So if you ever need anything, August, I'm the one to ask. You can ask me anything." "Okay," I mumbled. "Oh, look at that cute baby," Mom said, pointing to one of the photographs on Mrs. Garcia's bulletin board. "Is he yours?" "No, my goodness," said Mrs. Garcia, smiling a big smile now that was totally different from her shiny smile. "You've just made my day. He's my grandson." "What a cutie," said Mom, shaking her head. "How old?" "In that picture, he was 5 months, I think. But he's big now, almost 8 years old." "Wow," said Mom, nodding and smiling. "Well, he is absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," said Mrs. Garcia, nodding like she was about to say something else about her grandson. But then all of a sudden, her smile got a little smaller. "We're all going to take very good care of August," she said to Mom, and I saw her give Mom's hand a little squeeze. I looked at Mom's face, and that's when I realized that she was just as nervous as I was. I guess I liked Mrs. Garcia when she wasn't wearing her shiny smile. Now pause for a second. One thing I want to talk about is up here. It says, there weren't a lot of people around. Right here, when he meets Mrs. Garcia. She says, then the thing happened that I've seen happen a million times before. When I looked up at her, Mrs. Garcia's eyes dropped for a second. It was so fast that nobody else noticed, since the rest of her face stayed the same. I want you just to think in your heads, or you can say it out loud. Why do you think, what does that mean? He's seen it happen a million times, that her eyes drop for a second. Why would her eyes drop when she sees August? Why do people's eyes drop when they first see him? Yeah, maybe because they're surprised or they didn't know what he was going to look like. And because he does look a little bit different, they look down right away. And so I want you to think about that and think about how that probably makes August feel. Even though he knows it's not on purpose, it probably doesn't make him feel great, right? That probably hurts his feelings that people look down when they first see him instead of looking him in the eye. So I want you to think about that. And also I want you to think about how August's mom is probably feeling through all of this and how she's feeling about sending him to school. All right, we're going to keep going. We have one final chapter. So in this chapter, they're going to go on the school tour, and there's actually some new kids that come into the chapter. So let's see, and we'll keep learning about them tomorrow too. Jack Will is one person, Julian, and Charlotte. We followed Mr. Tushman into a small room across from Mrs. Garcia's desk. He was talking as he closed the door to his office and sat down behind a big desk, though I wasn't really paying much attention to what he was saying. I was looking around at all the things on his desk. It's cool stuff, like a globe that floated in the air and a Rubik's Cube made with little mirrors. I liked his office a lot. I liked that there were all these neat little drawings and paintings by students on the wall, framed like they were important. Mom sat in a chair in front of Mr. Tushman's desk, and even though there was another chair right next to hers, I decided to stand behind her. Why don't you have your own room? Why do you have your own room and Mr. G doesn't? I said. You mean, why do I have an office? Asked Mr. Tushman. You said she runs the place, I said. Oh, well, I was kind of kidding. Mrs. G is my assistant. Mr. Tushman is the director of the middle school, Mom explained. Do they call you Mr. T? I asked, which made him smile. Do you know who Mr. T is? He answered. I pity the fool, he said in a funny, tough voice, like he was imitating someone. I had no idea what he was talking about. Anyway, no, said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. No one calls me Mr. T, though I have a feeling I'm called a lot of other things I don't know about. Let's face it, a name like mine is not so easy to live with, if you know what I mean. Here I have to admit, I totally laughed because I knew exactly what he meant. My mom and dad had a teacher called Mrs. Butt, I said. Augie, said Mom, but Mr. Tushman laughed. Now that's bad, said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. I guess I shouldn't complain. Hey, so listen, August, here's what I thought we would do today. Is that a pumpkin? I said, pointing to the framed painting behind Mr. Tushman's desk. Augie, sweetie, don't interrupt, said Mom. You like it? Said Mr. Tushman, turning around looking at the painting. I do too. And I thought it was a pumpkin too, until the student who gave it to me explained that it's actually not a pumpkin. It's, are you ready for this? A portrait of me. Now, August, I ask you, do I really look like a pumpkin? No, I answered, though I was thinking yes. Something about the way his cheeks puffed out when he smiled made him look like a jack-o'-lantern. Just as I thought that, it occurred to me how funny that was. Cheeks, Mr. Tushman. And I started laughing a little. I shook my head and covered my mouth with my hand. Mr. Tushman smiled like he could read my mind. I was about to say something else, but then all of a sudden I heard other voices outside the office. Kids' voices. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but my heart literally started beating like I just run the longest race in the world. The laughter I had inside just poured out of me. The thing is, when I was little, I never minded meeting new kids because all the kids I met were really little too. What's cool about really little kids is that they don't say stuff to try to hurt your feelings, even though sometimes they do say stuff that hurts your feelings. But they don't actually know what they're saying. Big kids, though, they know what they're saying. And that is definitely not fun for me. One of the reasons I grew my hair so long last year was that I like how my bangs cover my eyes. It helps me block out things I don't want to see. Mrs. Garcia knocked on the door and poked her head inside. They're here, Mr. Tushman, she said. Who's here? I said. Thanks, said Mr. Tushman to Miss Garcia. August, I thought it would be a good idea for you to meet some students who will be in your homeroom this year. I figured they could take you around the school a bit, show you the lay of the land, so to speak. I don't want to meet anyone, I said to Mom. Mr. Tushman was suddenly right in front of me, his hands on my shoulders. He leaned down and said very softly in my ear, It'll be okay, August. These are nice kids. I promise. You're going to be okay, Augie, Mom whispered with all her might. Before she could say anything else, Mr. Tushman opened the door to his office. Come on in, kids, he said, and in walked 2 boys and a girl. None of them looked over at me, or Mom. They stood by the door looking straight at Mr. Tushman like their lives depended on it. Thanks so much for coming, guys, especially since school doesn't start until next month, said Mr. Tushman. Have you had a good summer? All of them nodded, but no one said anything. Great, said Mr. Tushman. So guys, I wanted you to meet August, who's going to be a new student here this year. August, these guys have been students at Beecher Prep since kindergarten. Though, of course, they were in the lower school building, but they know all the ins and outs of the middle school program. And since you're in the same homeroom, I thought it would be nice if you got to know each other a little before school started, okay? So kids, this is August. August, this is Jack Will. Jack Will looked at me and put out his hand. When I shook it, he kind of half smiled and said, Hey, and looked down really fast. This is Julian, said Mr. Tushman. Hey, said Julian, and did the exact same thing Jack Will did. Took my hand, forced a smile, and looked down fast. And Charlotte, said Mr. Tushman. Charlotte had the blondest hair I've ever seen. She didn't shake my hand, but she gave a little quick wave and smiled. Hi, August. Nice to meet you, she said. Hi, I said, looking down. She was wearing bright green Crocs. So, said Mr. Tushman, putting his hands together in kind of a slow clap, what I thought you guys could do is take August on a little tour of our school. Maybe you could start on the 3rd floor. That's where your homeroom class is going to be. Room 301. I think Mrs. G is room 301. Mrs. Garcia called out from the other room. Room 301. Mr. Tushman nodded. And then you can show August the science labs and the computer room. Then work your way down to the library and the performance space on the 2nd floor. Take him to the cafeteria, of course. Should we take him to the music room? Asked Julian. Good idea, yes, said Mr. Tushman. August, do you play any instruments? No, I said. It wasn't my favorite subject on account of the fact that I don't really have ears. Well, I do, but they don't exactly look like normal ears. Well, you may enjoy seeing the music room anyway, said Mr. Tushman. We have a very nice selection of percussion instruments. August, you've been wanting to learn to play the drums, Mom said, trying to get me to look at her. But my eyes were covered by my bangs as I stared at a piece of old gum that was stuck to the bottom of Mr. Tushman's desk. Great. Okay, so why don't you guys get going, said Mr. Tushman. Just be back here in, he looked at my mom, half an hour? Okay? I think Mom nodded. So, is that okay with you, August? He asked me. I didn't answer. Is that okay, August? Mom repeated. I looked at her now. I wanted her to see how mad I was at her. But then I saw her face and just nodded. She seemed more scared than I was. The other kids had started out the door, so I followed them. See you soon, said Mom, her voice sounding a little higher than normal. I didn't answer her. All right, so I want you to think about how is August feeling now? So you're going to answer this question about how he was feeling before, and then it's not going to let me go forward because you need to answer these, and then you'll move on to the next section. There's 2 more questions to answer, a part A and a part B, and you'll submit your answer. And tomorrow we will read a few more chapters, and we'll get to know those 3 new characters, Charlotte, Jack, Will, and Julian. All right, see you tomorrow. Bye.